Hi again, everyone. Patrick Fingston here. I write the Illinoize political newsletter, which you can find every day at theillinoize.com. That's ILLINOIZE.com. Welcome to our almost somewhat kind of weekly podcast that we post here on YouTube or on your favorite podcast platform in an audio form. Excited to have you today. Coming up on this show, we'll talk to State Representative Ryan Spain. He's a Republican from Peoria on the upcoming veto session in Springfield and all of the top issues that are facing the state, including migrants and scholarships for kids in failing schools, as well as some issues relating to Ameren as well, and a veto of legislation that they were given as well. Brenden Moore from Lee Enterprises, which is the Bloomington Pantograph, the Decatur Herald and Review, Southern Illinoisan, all of those newspapers will join us as well to talk about the upcoming veto session, as well as one of the top congressional races in the state and the new Republican candidate there, and the potential for a big race in Illinois' 17th Congressional District. First, though, we wanted to talk a little bit about the ongoing issue regarding the migrant crisis in the state. And it's been a huge story, so I don't have to rehash it here. I would just tell you to go read the Chicago Tribune or the Sun-Times, or watch any of the great stories on WTTW that they've done that relate to the influx of legal asylum seekers that have been shipped to Chicago from Texas. These are not people who are entering the country illegally. They're people who have been running from corruption and violence and cartels in their home country, a lot of times Venezuela. They've walked in cases more than 1,000 miles through 60 miles of jungle where there are no roads between Colombia and Panama. We're talking about people who want it. They want to be here. But the issue is that the federal government has no plan as to how to take care of these folks. And Texas was overwhelmed and in a bit of a political move. And it's, again, hard to blame him politically. The governor of Texas sent buses and buses and buses of migrants and is continuing to send them to blue states like New York, like California, and of course to Chicago and the city of Chicago and all of its budget solidity, I guess, its lack of a solid budget are having a hard time trying to house these migrants and feed them and get them what they need to be able to survive and make it through. And I think, again, we need to be clear that these aren't people who are here illegally. They have a legal right to be in this country. So the question has been the new mayor of Chicago, Brenden Johnson, his administration has been asking the state to come up with more money. And there was talk earlier in the week that the state legislature during the veto session could potentially pass a supplemental budget appropriation. And the Speaker of the House this week, Chris Welch, kind of put an end to that discussion.
I did meet with the mayor last week. We had a very positive conversation like we always do, but our conversation wasn't limited to one topic. We talked about several things that is on his agenda as the new mayor of Chicago, things that he talked about that would impact him in the coming months, but certainly in the next year or so. The migrant crisis was certainly one of those things that we discussed. And one thing that we completely agreed on was that this is a national crisis that's going to call for a national response, that we need the White House to step up and do more on this issue, and that we join the governor in his call for the White House to do more. And that was specifically stated at that meeting.
Was there a specific dollar figure that he asked for in terms of more funding for the state, a supplemental in the veto session or anything like that?
At that time, there was no request made specifically because I think I made it clear that we were not expecting to do a supplemental budget in the veto session.
So that appears to be your answer, that there won't be any sort of supplemental budget during the veto session. So let's get a lot more into this as we bring in State Representative Ryan Spain. We're pleased to be joined now by State Representative Ryan Spain, a Republican from Peoria, a member of House Republican leader Tony McCombie's leadership, one of the outspoken leaders in the Republican side, especially on financial issues. Representative, I think that's where we need to start as we're approaching veto session here in a week and a half. Speaker Welch, we're recording this Friday morning. He said on Thursday that we just played a few minutes ago that there will not be a supplemental budget appropriation during the veto session for the migrant crisis, mostly in the city of Chicago, though not exclusively to the city of Chicago. From a Republican perspective, what should the state be doing regarding this migrant crisis? And let's be clear that these are people who are here legally and not people that are just sneaking over the border here illegally. What should the state be doing?
Yeah, there's a lot of nuance to this issue, and you're right. Asylum seekers are here under a legal process. We also have illegal immigration, which is a huge problem. We can touch upon that in terms of healthcare services in the state of Illinois. And I think the purpose of the way this issue has been nationalized now, where it's a major problem in the city of Chicago and in other large cities across the country, is to draw attention to the fact that we do need a national solution, and we need our elected leaders who are experiencing a whole different set of challenges in Washington, D.C., to get together and really solve this issue. So I think when you see the speaker and the governor talk about not having a supplemental spending bill during veto session on this topic, it reflects the reality that we need national leaders to step up and do something. Now, in the meantime, practically for the state of Illinois, creates a lot of challenges where the amount of money that is being spent taking care of this influx of migrants is coming at a cost of other programs or services that are very important as well. So this is a tough issue for everyone, but it reflects why we need to have a better border here for the United States of America.
I'm interested in the mood of your caucus, and I don't know the last time you guys spoke as a caucus, but there's definitely a far right voice inside your caucus that is essentially anti-immigrant. There's a more moderate suburban part of your caucus as well. What do Republicans in the legislature want to do? Do they want to do anything, or are you essentially saying, sorry, Chicago, this is your problem?
No, I mean, listen, we're all state representatives, and while that means representing your individual district, you don't forget about the state part. And so we have challenges facing our state. And I certainly think that our caucus should be at the table thinking about how to navigate them. And, when we're included and invited to the table, in my experience, good things can happen. Now, the Democrats have worked so hard to create these artificial supermajorities that they believe they don't need to talk to the other side of the aisle. And that's certainly the strategy of the Speaker of the House. And it's unfortunately been the strategy of the governor. And it doesn't work real well. And that's actually how we found ourselves in the situation of the massive budget deficit for providing Medicaid-like services to undocumented immigrants, with a $1.5 billion budget hole that had to be resolved mostly through administrative procedures and rulemaking through the Department of Healthcare and Family Services. It's a terrible way to navigate really important issues. And it all came about because we had a bipartisan, bicameral Medicaid working group that essentially was dissolved by the Democrats because at the last second, they took the agreed upon solutions within the Medicaid program and added something that had been not discussed at the table by anyone, which was to provide this free healthcare service, which is against federal law, by the way, to a certain undocumented immigrant population, and they've expanded that 3 times, and it's resulted in a major budget deficit. So I would just say our caucus stands ready to be at the table and help deliver solutions, but these guys don't come forward and ask for any help, and they certainly need it.
I think that brings up an interesting dilemma, and I think that ties into the migrant crisis and the healthcare for undocumented immigrants. They're related, obviously, but they're not the same budget issues. The state program for undocumented people are specifically for those who are here illegally. Asylum seekers aren't here illegally. They have healthcare protections through the federal government, but that any question about a supplemental for migrants, I think if there was any money, the question is how much of it is going to be tied up in this healthcare for undocumented people program, because the cost estimate was we wrote about this earlier in the week. Cost estimate was $1.2 billion. The legislature gave them half that. The governor wanted to cut costs, institute copays. Copays have already been reversed. It seems, and Gombe's not giving us any numbers, but it seems that it's going to be incredibly difficult for the governor to keep those costs in check. So I guess the question is not only just migrants, but does the state have any money to do anything at this point?
Well, the days of free federal cash raining down upon all the states is over. And so we're starting to see this return to budget austerity. It's going to require the Pritzker administration, again, to engage differently. And they would be wise to reach across the aisle and engage in some actions of bipartisanship, because it really has been a lucky break, the amount of outside federal resources that have descended upon the states. And we're at a position where we can't sustain these programs anymore, and they're coming at the cost of other opportunities. So healthcare is a great one. It now needs to be managed. Look, we have a managed Medicaid system that one of the principles of it is to control costs, which is very important in healthcare. The undocumented healthcare benefit for the undocumented population is not managed in any way. There have been massive cost overruns at certain hospitals for inpatient admissions that are just not appropriate. And so we've got to put our arms around this and govern it. And that requires cooperation between the executive branch and the legislature. So I hope we can see more of that going forward. But it has been something in very short supply within the Pritzker administration for many years now.
Another issue that some are hoping is resolved in veto session is the fate of the Invest in Kids program, which is a scholarship program, a voluntary scholarship program for underprivileged kids to be able to get out of a failing public school and into a private school. It's different than a voucher system in a lot of states, but it still has a ton of pushback from teachers unions and progressives who think that it's somehow taking money away from public schools. Republicans are all in on renewing this program. Democrats have said in their caucus last week that they're still polling on the issue. They haven't made a decision. Why should this program that gives some tax breaks for rich folks and helps a few kids out, what is important about this program to you?
Well, I think that school choice is very important, and this is the lowest hanging option to us within a portfolio of school choice. To me, it's an absolutely no-brainer that this program would be extended. It's the top priority for me coming into veto session. And look, I think that should be a good thing. If you see Republicans are strongly in favor of this, and a number of Democrats as well, that's the kind of bipartisan cooperation we need to return to in the state of Illinois. I wish the governor would put some muscle behind this, because it is really important. And I think it works in a good way, where you could have an important tax credit made available that then creates a scholarship pool so that low-income kids can have better education opportunities. And, the hypocrisy that we've seen from certain Democratic leaders who stand up and blare their opposition to school choice and then are sending their children to private schools. I mean, it's really galling, that type of hypocrisy that exists. So I hope this can be an opportunity to work together. And what a shame it would be to take something that has been good for kids in the state of Illinois. Let's continue it. Let's expand it. Let's make sure that we're creating opportunities for children, low-income children in all type of districts and settings throughout the state of Illinois to make sure that they can get a really good education.
It's really interesting to me, the numbers on this. I mean, we're talking 9,500 kids that are in the program right now for what it's funded. Generally, heavily in Chicago, heavily African American, that are kids that are having opportunities, educationally, potentially to go to college, which they may not have had in a public school in their neighborhood, and the struggle of Chicago public high schools is well documented. I'm trying to understand, other than teachers unions, like as you've talked to your colleagues as much as it is, what's the argument against this? Because I'm having a really hard time. Like you can argue vouchers, even though I've said before I'm for vouchers. I think that you got to put kids in the best position possible, but you can make an informed argument against that. What are you hearing from your Democratic colleagues? Because I don't understand the argument against it.
Yeah, I hear some misinformation, quite frankly, that dollars are being diverted away from public education. Listen, I strongly support public education. I'm a product of a public school system in Peoria that was excellent for me. But we have been investing heavily in more funding for our K-12 education system at a public level in the state of Illinois for many years now. I mean, this is one of the bipartisan successes that I could look back and credit over the last 4 to 5 years. So it would be a credible argument if we created this program and at the same time have been funding less and less into public education in the state of Illinois. But that's not the case. We have hundreds of millions of dollars of increases to public education funding. So this is something that, again, I think it should be a no-brainer, and it will be an incredible setback for the state of Illinois if this program is not extended during veto session.
Another veto session issue is a controversial bill that gives Ameren the right of first refusal to build essentially transmission lines in their service area. I've said before that I didn't think it was a great bill, but you're for it. The governor vetoed it. Why do you support it? Why should that veto be overturned in veto session?
Well, look, I don't know if it will be overturned. I don't know if we will consider any veto overrides during the veto session. And that's really a shame. I think many of these issues should be put up for an up or down vote. But look, in the part of the downstate Illinois where I live, which is the Ameren service territory, we have seen 2 or 3 times increases to our utility bills due to the governor's action for his Climate Equity Jobs Act. And the provisions that have been instituted have come at a great cost to our ability to generate and deliver power in downstate Illinois. And this is, I think it's important to emphasize this, because if you live in the ComEd service territory, your power bills have remained pretty stable. In downstate Illinois, if you're in Ameren, 2 or 3 time increase to your utility bills, residentially and for commercial and industrial properties. That is a killer for business. So anything to me that gives Ameren an opportunity to operate more efficiently and can deliver their services in a way that can be cost conscious for downstate Illinois is something that we need to look at. And I'm just infuriated by the governor for not understanding and owning up to the very negative effects that have been passed through his environmental policies that have affected our energy grid in downstate Illinois.
As someone who lives in that ComEd service area, I can argue that the rates haven't necessarily stayed the same over the last couple of years. They have gone up significantly for a lot of folks up here.
But Patrick, they haven't doubled or tripled.
Close in some months, but yeah, no. But I definitely understand what you're saying. Another one of the things you and I were talking about earlier in the week, and you wanted to touch on this, and I had some thoughts on it on social media this week, was this Washington Post story that about redistricting in the state, and you led the House Republican redistricting effort, such as it was, when Democrats controlled the whole kit and caboodle. The governor's office, or at least some of the governor's top honchos, have pushed back that Republican extremists are winning because of Republican extremism and not because of gerrymandering. But if you pack as many conservative voters into a district as you possibly can, you're going to get the most conservative person to win. And if you gerrymander Nikki Budzinski's district and draw Rodney Davis out of it and take it from an R+3 to a D+11, you're going to win that race for Democrats. But I'm interested because, and I think this can lead into our campaign topic here at the end, but your party is dealing with a dramatic rightward shift. And I think we can see what's happening in Washington right now as a big part of that. Who's to blame for that? I mean, redistricting, of course, plays a role, but Mary Miller didn't beat Rodney Davis just simply because they were in a new district.
Yeah, well, first, let me speak to the Washington Post article. I'd heard that the Post was working on this. Of course, you might remember that they gave Illinois a designation as the worst partisan gerrymandered state in the country several months ago when they were editorializing on the topic. So it was interesting that they wrote, and I think we have to acknowledge that there are devastating consequences to gerrymandering when it's led by Republicans, or in the case of Illinois, masterfully led by the Democrats, including Governor Pritzker, who, to me, personally broke his word and broke the most important promise that he made on the campaign trail when initially running for governor, that he would stand up for independent maps, that he would veto any partisan gerrymandering. And it is just, it is beyond the pale to me to see the governor's chief of staff ranting and raving and claiming that there was no partisan gerrymandering conducted by their office and by the Democratic supermajority in the state of Illinois. And they have created problems both on the right and the left, because we have seen very good legislators defeated in their Democratic primaries as well because of the nature of the gerrymandering that was delivered in the map. But it is particularly visible for Republicans. And Patrick, it is just astounding to me. Did you know that we had more votes for Republican House members in the Illinois House of Representatives than Democratic votes for Democratic House members, to the tune of about 70,000 more Republican votes? So if you added up all the votes of the state of Illinois, we have more Republicans receiving a vote than Democrats. And yet the Democrats have a 2/3 supermajority in the Illinois House of Representatives. It leads you to believe that we have this dark blue state that just isn't actually a reality. Most people would like to see working together in the middle with common sense policies that would be good for families and economic growth in the state of Illinois. But we don't have that. And it comes back to our gerrymandering, our redistricting, and the Democrats' insatiable desire to have absolute power and control in the state of Illinois. And it is dead wrong Ian Caprera and Andy Menard and anyone else who tries to tell you differently.
You're back this cycle as chair of the House Republican organization, the House campaign arm. Tim Ozinga was chair and stepped aside, and you're back in. I'm not stepping out by saying it was a disastrous year for Republicans in Illinois last year. In the tune that there are now 78 Democrats in the House. We've reported that your caucus has had a hard time recruiting candidates in some districts. That obviously fundraising has been a real challenge for some of your most vulnerable incumbents. You have 7 districts where you all are defending that Joe Biden won in 2020. Donald Trump looks to be the Republican nominee again in 2024, which is a potential death knell in the suburbs. How do you, as a Republican who's trying to win seats, look at this optimistically? Because I think there are a lot of pieces of evidence that those of us on the outside look at and say, man, this could be terrible for Republicans.
Yeah. Well, I would say a couple of things. First of all, on the fundraising front, Leader McCombie is doing a terrific job. And for any new leader to ramp up an entire fundraising operation, it's a hard challenge. And I think you'll see that her progress has really been successful and will continue to build and build. So we will go out and make sure that we have the resources to compete and be successful. I think in terms of candidate recruitment, I'm pleased with the gains that we've been making. Look, the districts are funny. And, you look at the nature of recruiting candidates and people have a look at the legislative territories they may need to represent. And there was a deliberate action by Democrats to make sure that the districts did not have a good nexus or geographic connectivity. And so candidates are sensitive to that. And so we're overcoming that step by step. But I would say most importantly, and the reason I am optimistic, we've done actually really well in presidential election cycles within our caucus, making gains in 2020 when Donald Trump was on the ballot, making gains in 2016 when Donald Trump was on the ballot. And so there's almost a presumption that presidential years are really tricky for Republicans in Illinois. And that historically hasn't always been the case. And I'm really encouraged that what we won't have this election cycle is the election interference of J.B. Pritzker, who invested $35 million to interfere in the Republicans' gubernatorial primary 2 years ago. And so not having that type of distraction is very positive for us.
Last question for you. Your Senator Win Stoller is not seeking re-election next year. Your name was the first one that popped up and you immediately said, no, not interested. Why not?
Well, for a number of reasons, maybe the geography of the district, the timing for
Speaking of gerrymandering,
but my House district is half of that Senate district. I would just say most importantly, though, I have the great honor of serving as one of the deputy leaders for the Republican House Caucus, which is a job that I really treasure and appreciate. And then most importantly, just kind of being in the weeds as state government nerds, I serve as the co-chair of JCAR. And that is a position that there's a co-chairman from the House Republicans and the Senate Democrats. And it is one of the only balanced committees in terms of bipartisanship in the state of Illinois. And if you kind of hear what's in my heart about redistricting, that's where I want to be, working on bipartisan issues that can actually make a difference for the people of the state of Illinois. And I just didn't want to give that up.
Representative Ryan Spain, a Republican from Peoria. Representative, we've been trying to get this figured out the last couple of months. I appreciate you fitting us in and taking the time.
Thanks, Patrick. Go Illini.
Well, thanks to Representative Spain as we bring in Brenden Moore from Lee Enterprises. All right, let's get into veto session a little bit more here with Brenden Moore, the state government reporter from Lee Enterprises, which is your Bloomington Pantograph, Decatur Herald and Review, Southern Illinoisan, et cetera, et cetera. Brenden, I appreciate you taking the time. It's it's a weird feeling to be 10 days out from veto session as we record this, and we kind of have no idea what Democrats are planning to do. What's the feeling you're getting among lawmakers as we prepare to head back?
Well, Patrick, you described it pretty accurately. I think the feeling amongst most people is that we're kind of in a holding pattern. There are a lot of issues kind of up in the air that we're going to see if lawmakers try to take on in a few weeks, or does it get punted to the spring session, or does it just not get taken up at all? I think a couple of things to look out for are a couple of energy-related bills that the governor vetoed a few months ago. One of them being the Ameren transmission lines bill. Basically would give Ameren the right of first refusal to build new transmission lines. And then there's the nuclear moratorium bill that would lift the nuclear moratorium in Illinois. The governor vetoed both of those. There has been talks of a compromise on the nuclear bill. We'll see if that language gets changed. Some of the advocates for the Ameren bill, including organized labor and their allies in the legislature, have talked about trying for an override. But again, we'll see if maybe there is a way where everybody can win. And then obviously there are a few other issues kind of that we've kind of been signaled won't be coming up, such as funding for supplemental funding for Chicago to deal with the migrant crisis. Speaker Welch kind of threw cold water on that yesterday, basically said they're not expecting to do that. The governor hasn't shown a lot of interest in that either. So we're really going to see here probably within the next week, I think we'll probably get a better idea of where things stand on all these different issues. And that's not even getting to the Invest in Kids scholarship program. I should mention that too. Provides I guess, tax credit for people that give to this scholarship program. Allows kids to go to private school. I've heard that there may be talks of that getting punted to January. That talks are still very fluid on that. So again, like you said, there's we have a sense of what issues might come up, but we don't know for certain if they are going to come up in a few weeks.
Let's start with the migrant situation, and we just spent a lot of time on that with Representative Spain, but I was surprised at how quickly the conversation this week alone, as I was hearing from Democrats on Monday, that there was a possibility it could happen, and the speaker's spokesperson even said discussions are ongoing. By Wednesday, the governor says, I don't think so. And on Thursday, the speaker essentially kills it. Has something changed in this conversation in the last couple of weeks, or maybe we were getting, I don't want to say bad information, but maybe not a clear understanding? Do we know where this conversation has gone?
Yeah, I mean, at least on the governor's side, he's always been very clear about, we will do the things we can do within the constraints of the budget. And this year, there's a lot less room to work with in the budget. As you'll remember, we had this whole debate in the spring about this healthcare program for undocumented immigrants that was going way over what was budgeted. They put in cost controls, but that's just an example of there are programs such as that are taking away funds in the budget that could go to other things. And then obviously we're coming down from that COVID high. On the legislator side, I mean, my sense is that obviously everyone has been very critical of the governor of Texas and others who have sent busloads of these people to Chicago and other Democratic-run cities. But I do think there is something to, once the problem is on your doorstep, it can change how you think about certain things, because all of a sudden, you're charged with providing shelter for these folks and food and resources. It takes a lot of money, and legislators, and I think you've seen this in the Chicago City Council a little bit too, that they have priorities. They have constituents that need help too, And I think a lot of the sense is, and we've seen this with we've seen some tension on this, especially with proposals for shelters in underserved communities in Chicago, of legislators and aldermen saying, hey, we want to help these people, but also my community is suffering and we need resources. And so, the pie is only so big. And so I think in the case of Speaker Welch, he probably took the temperature of his caucus and realized there probably just is not enough support. Because you're not going to get support from Republicans, and if the Democratic caucus is divided, that's probably not something you want to bring up, especially with so little time before veto session.
I wanted to talk about the nuclear bill with you specifically, because this one is really kind of confusing to me, how it's become such a hot button issue, a super bipartisan bill, which the Ameren bill was pretty bipartisan too, even though it was kind of pushed through at the last second, and I don't know that everybody completely understood what they were voting on that one, but the nuclear bill was pretty straightforward and pretty obvious that we can come up with ways to boost new energy production here. Obviously, the green folks don't like it, and they think we can transition to wind and solar tomorrow, which any smart person realizes isn't the case. Why did the governor veto that, and does it have a shot? Because it sounds like the speaker is kind of on board with where the governor's at.
Yeah. So the governor vetoed it. He said at the time at the behest of House leadership, and obviously, as you mentioned, the environmental community was against that bill. They have a very uneasy relationship with nuclear, even though it's a carbon-free source of energy, and quite frankly, is going to be needed if Illinois wants to meet its clean energy goals under CEJA. But according to the governor and to the folks that opposed this bill, the language was too broad. That apparently it would lift the moratorium and it would allow for things that were not intended. So the governor and folks say they're not against nuclear, but they want to limit it to small modular reactors. So basically, not like what you see in Byron or Dresden, where you have the big plant and base load energy. That's been pretty common, for the past several decades in this state. This would be, say, if the University of Illinois wanted to put in a kind of a micro reactor to power its campus. So they want to make sure that is what it's used for. And so I think there is room for compromise on that, because there was language before it was amended that basically limited it to that. Obviously, the sponsor, State Senator Sue Rezin, says that that's what it already does. We don't need to change it, but it really is just a quibble over language, just ensuring that the bill does what it's intended to do. I could see there being room for compromise on that. I don't know if we'll see an override attempt. I think that might just be a separate bill, but it seems like something will get done on that.
On the Invest in Kids program, which you brought up a minute ago, and we talked about with Representative Spain too, the Democrats in a caucus last week, I guess, told their members they were still polling on the issue. Though, as I talk to Democrats, the feeling, even if they're not coming out and saying it, is essentially that they think this thing is dead. Is there hope for it during veto? Because it's sure feeling like a tough haul at this point.
I don't think there's hope for it in veto. I think the only hope that the advocates have is that lawmakers come back in January and within that 3-month span, lawmakers have a change of heart, or or just change their tune. It's really an interesting topic, Patrick, because it's really not a huge part of the budget. It's not really a huge program in the sense that, I mean, it's not a huge chunk of kids that
It's
are
not really
participating.
in the budget at all. I mean, it's not state dollars.
No, it's really, but it's become a big issue because it's kind of a symbolic issue. Teachers unions, and advocates for public schools really don't like it because they think that it's diverting money from public schools, which it really isn't, because again, these are scholarships. It's a very small part of the budget, but
No, and I said this with Representative Spain a minute ago, that you can have the argument,
mhm,
even though I've said before I'm pro voucher,
yeah,
as someone who grew up in a very rural school that didn't have a lot of opportunities. I'm pro voucher, but like, you can have the argument about government vouchers taking money away from public schools. This isn't government money.
right, right. No, these are folks that are getting a tax break for funding these scholarships, and I think that if anything, I, I know there's a wait list and everything, but there are students that are currently on it that are kind of waiting for word on this. I do think there may be an effort to make sure that those students will be able to stay in the school that they're in now. Folks that are in the program now can continue. But again, it's all very much up in the air. All I can really say that I do feel pretty certain that we're not going to see anything on this come up in veto. If anything, it's going to be come back in January. It expires January 1st, but the legislature's been known to do things retroactive from time to time. So they may retroactively extend it, or again, at least allow these students that are currently have these scholarships to continue to have these scholarships, so it doesn't upend them, especially in the middle of the school year.
Before we let you go, Brenden, I know you've been covering congressional races. The 17th is probably the most interesting one in the state in the fall. Republicans have gone through a long list of potential candidates. Even before he was Speaker, now former Speaker McCarthy, try and put the math together on that, tried to get Neil Anderson in the race for the 17th. They tried to get Tony McCombie. Dan Brady's name was thrown around. This Ray Estrada businessman from Galesburg was in for a while. Now it appears that Republicans have settled behind a recently retired judge from Winnebago County named Joe McGraw. I've tried to get a hold of him for the last few weeks and haven't been able to talk to him. What do you know about him? And is this going to be a big fight next November?
Yeah, so Judge Joe McGraw is a recently retired circuit court judge from the 17th Circuit, which covered Winnebago and Boone counties. He was the chief of their criminal division for since 2004. He was the chief judge for a few years, but he's a relative unknown. I have to say I had not heard of him until a couple of weeks ago. As you said, Patrick, I mean, the national Republicans were shopping for a candidate for this race, which could be close next year. But a lot of folks took a pass on it. And so that is kind of telling. He's a relative unknown, but I think that national Republicans like his law enforcement or his judicial background, which they think could give him some authority on some of these criminal justice issues, these issues of urban crime, maybe on the border, and they think that he's kind of a straight-laced guy. Whether he has a shot next year against Congressman Eric Sorensen, I think that remains to be seen. As you said, it is easily the most competitive congressional district in the state, but Congressman Sorensen won it by 4 points last year. It was heavily contested. A lot of national money in the race. But it's a presidential year. President Biden last time won it by 7-8 points. And if we have a rematch of Biden Trump, I don't know if the dynamics are necessarily going to change too much. And this time, obviously, Congressman Sorensen's running as an incumbent. He's going to have a financial advantage, at least at the beginning. So it's a tough race. And obviously, you mentioned National Republicans too, Patrick, that they have a 5-seat majority in the House, as we've seen on display the past couple of weeks with the chaos of electing a speaker. But they hold 18 seats that were won by President Biden in 2020. So I think their focus is going to be first and foremost on defending those seats. And then you get to, I think Sorensen's on a list of like 36 or 37, Democrats targeted for defeat. We'll have to see how high he is on that list, what the priority is. And might be contingent also on how McGraw does as a candidate. I mean, I don't think anybody else is jumping into this race of any consequence. He announced with an endorsement list that was pretty long. Pretty much every state legislator in the district, which, as you said, indicated that most everyone else took a pass on this race. Which you can read that for what it is.
It's also going to be interesting to see what the NRCC situation is with the speaker's mess, because Kevin McCarthy has been raising a crap ton of money. Mm-hmm. And there are also implications there in that Bost Bailey primary, because the NRCC had looked like it was going to be for Bost, and now if Jim Jordan ends up speaker as we record this, who the heck knows? But Jordan's not the fundraiser that McCarthy was. We don't know who's going to have the resources, or if the NRCC is going to have the resources. So really the conversation today is even different than it was 2 weeks ago, and is different than it will be 2 weeks from now.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to raise money as a candidate for Congress. I think that McGraw will need help from national Republicans if they want to make this competitive. Last time, between the NRCC and the Congressional Leadership Fund, I believe about $7 million was spent on the conservative side. Obviously, Democrats spent a lot of money too. We're going to have to see if they're going to be willing to invest, the same amount this time. Or, I'm pretty sure Democrats will be in to protect Sorensen. He already has a decent amount of money saved up. So it's going to be a tough race.
Brenden Moore, Lee Enterprises, Bloomington Pantagraph, Southern Illinoisan, Decatur Herald and Review, Journal Gazette, Times Courier, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. All those good papers. Brenden, thanks so much for the time. Appreciate it as always, and we'll see you in Springfield here in a couple weeks.
Yeah, always a pleasure, Patrick. Thank you.
All right, great. Thanks to Brenden Moore from Lee Enterprises for his time talking about the upcoming legislative session, veto session, and the big potential race in the 17th Congressional District. Appreciate him taking the time. Also appreciate Ryan Spain, Republican from Peoria, state representative, for joining us as well. And thank you for taking the time to join us and take part in the conversation as always. We'd love to hear more from you. Drop us a note anytime at mailbag@theillinoize.com. I'd love to talk to you and come back to you with more here in the next couple of weeks. And we'll come back with more. We'll see you again next time here on the Illinoize.